Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 2.8 in our Authoritarian Leaders unit in IB History 1. And today's lesson is going to be all about the Holocaust. So this is going to be a very sad and somber lesson, so let's just prepare ourselves to expect that. But by the end of this lesson, students will be able to describe certain aspects of the Holocaust, including race laws in Germany. You should be able to explain the Jewish badge system developed by the Nazis. You should also be able to describe the different types of concentration camps that existed, and you should be able to illustrate the death toll facts from the Holocaust. And of course, this goes without saying, there are huge amounts of trigger warnings to all of you. You will find these images disturbing, but just understand that there will be some disturbing images coming through for obvious reasons as we are just discussing the Holocaust. So for the first few slides that we're going to look at, this is the key question that we want you to look at. What stands out to you the most? So just take a look at these statistics. In your own words, what does the term the Holocaust refer to? And then look at these statistics that you see. Pause for a moment and just reflect. What stands out to you the most? Again here. What stands out to you the most? Here's the question. Most who underestimate the number of Jews killed in Holocaust have neutral or warm feelings toward Jews. What stands out to you the most here? Pause if you need to. Again, what stands out to you the most? More Holocaust knowledge tied to warm feelings or warmer feelings towards Jews. Most Americans say the Holocaust refers to the annihilation of Jews. Look at these statistics and what stands out to you the most. Pause if you need to. What stands out to you the most here as well? If you look here, atheists and agnostics most likely to know Hitler became Chancellor of Germany through democratic political process. So take a look at these data here. What stands out to you most about this data? Pause again if you need to reflect a little bit more. And then lastly, what stands out to you the most here on this one? Educational attainment is associated with more knowledge about the Holocaust. Take a gander at this data here. If you look at here, what stands out to you most regarding this particular data here? So all of these slides that you've looked at so far have been data regarding education and understanding of the Holocaust. So what patterns have you noticed? What generalities can you make regarding the data that you have now analyzed? Okay, so think about this data as we begin our journey, because the next slides are going to actually begin the note session of this lesson. But think about the data that we have just looked at as you're moving through this lesson, and how important it is for us to educate and understand the history of the Holocaust. So to begin our discussion on the Holocaust, let's take a moment to stop and discuss some information about the ghettos that are established under the Nazi regime. Now, after the Nazis invaded and occupied Poland in 1939, which began World War II, they began segregating Jews into places called ghettos, and these were usually the most poorest and most rundown areas of town. And so the Nazis rounded up the Jewish individuals and forced them to move to these areas. And so here's a nice picture showing of what one of these areas would have looked like. By 1941, nearly all of the Jews in occupied Poland had been forced into these overcrowded ghettos. So it took them about 2 years to do so. Almost every single Jewish person was living in a ghetto at some point. In Warsaw alone, one of the largest ghettos that they ever created had about 490,000 Jews and a few Roma and Sinti individuals that were struggling to survive in these areas against impressive and unsurmountable odds and extreme hardship. And in the larger cities and larger areas, ghettos were shut in by walls. And so literally the Nazis would, at the end of a street, they would just, start bricking into that road at the end of these two houses so that where you would just go to the end of the street and it just stopped, and it basically walled in the Jews and the Roma Sinti people and other individuals they would put in these ghettos, and keep them in there in these poor and squalid conditions. You could not leave or enter without a special permit unless you had any business there. You could not leave or enter at any time. Each one of these ghettos were charged with creating what was called a Judenrat, which was like a Jewish council, which was be responsible for enforcing German rules and orders in this particular community. So it really wasn't a democratic council. It was literally the Jewish individuals electing some people among themselves to basically tell them they had to follow the Nazi rules, is basically what it amounted to. Some examples of the Holocaust and how German law impacted Jewish individuals. Let's take a look at education law. In April 1933, on April 25th, in fact, there was a law passed in Germany called the Law Against Overcrowding in Schools and Universities. That sounds like a great title. As an educator myself, I'd totally be in support of that. I mean, I would totally vote in favor of this law, just by the title by itself. However, let's take a look deeper into what the law says. Jewish students could be no more than 5% of the student population in any public school or university. Okay, so now they're basically putting a cap on how many Jewish students you can have in a school or university. Many Jewish students left public school and to attend private school as a result. But you got to think about this. Private school costs money. Not every single Jewish family had the financial means to be able to send their children to private school. German schools taught Nazi racial science. So if you're a Jewish child sitting in a Nazi classroom, you're going to be, picked on more than likely, and you're going to be probably bullied severely. And of course, you're going to be taught about the Aryan racial superiority, which you're not going to fit into that category. So you're definitely going to be alienated and made to feel like an outsider. Well, the Nazi regime, as they continue to gain and consolidate and control Germany through increasing power, they're going to cement their anti-Semitic and racist law system through something called the Nuremberg race laws. And so what these race laws did was that they defined and outlined the status of a Jew in the Reich, so a Jewish person living in Germany at that time. First of all, they declared that these individuals were not citizens, and they were, quote, subjects of the state. So what this means is that the state is Germany, and these Jewish individuals were subjects of Germany, meaning that Germany was to be in control of these people. So just like, people, the official term is people are subjects of Queen Elizabeth II, meaning she supposedly controls them. That's what that means. So basically Germany was now saying Jews are under our control. They also stipulated you're not allowed to marry or have intimate relations with a non-Jewish person. So if you were Jewish and you were in a romantic relationship with someone who was not Jewish, that was strictly forbidden under Nazi law. It defined the term for Jewishness or Jewry as a race, as opposed to delineating Judaism as a religion, a tribe, or a culture. So what this means is that the German government, in essence, was looking at the Jewishness of people as a race and not looking at the religion. They really were not. They were seeing Judaism as a race and Jewishness as a race, and that's what they were using to justify their racism and their anti-Semitic behavior. Not so much about focusing on the religion or the culture or anything like that of Judaism. So regulations are later added, explaining that Germans descended from one or two Jewish grandparents would be considered Mischlings or mixed race. So this term is, in Nazi Germany, not exactly a positive term, because that does mean the government has decided or has declared that, according to your family tree, that you do have some Jewish blood somewhere in there, so you're not exactly part of that pure race. Okay? So remember, that's a key thing that German Nazis are looking for. Mischlings could vote and hold civil service jobs as of 1935, as opposed to those with 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents who lost those privileges in 1933. The Nazis also passed another law that was anti-Semitic, that was the Jewish name law, and this was actually passed in 1938 in August. And the official title of it was Law on the Alteration of Family and Personal Names. Very legalish. It required Jews who who did not have Jewish first names. So, according to Nazi belief or Nazi ideology, Jewish people are supposed to have quote unquote Jewish sounding names. That in and of itself is racist. And if you didn't have those, then the German government required that if you were a boy, you would have to insert the name Israel somewhere, and that if you were a woman, you would have to insert the name Sarah somewhere. So if you did not have a Jewish enough sounding name and you yourself were Jewish, the German government required for you to pick one of those names to put in there so that they could identify you as a Jewish person. By January 1st, 1939, all Jews needed new passports that could identify and identifying cards that would list their new names so that they could be better identified. And documents were marked with the letter J to identify them as a Jewish person. Of course, the ever famous, everybody knows this particular aspect of the Holocaust better than probably most aspects, but the Jewish badge that the Nazi regime required for Jewish individuals to wear. Here's a picture of what one of those badges would have looked like. It's the Yellow Star of David. Now, this particular policy was instituted on September 1st, 1941, is when this particular policy went into effect. And so it's not unique to Nazi Germany. In earlier periods in European history, Jews actually had to wear badges or patches or medals or something like that that could identify them as a Jewish person, and this was always accompanied by anti-Semitic laws that were established by Christian rulers in Europe. So Jewish individuals have been facing this kind of discrimination for centuries in Europe. Nazi Germany actually forced Jews to wear a yellow Star of David. And this was used as a very quick means to identify a Jewish person walking down the street and to be identifying them very easily in public. And so it took time for this particular policy to spread, however. So please understand that it did take time. In Poland, Jews had to wear them beginning in 1939. And in the Netherlands, Jews didn't have to wear them until 1942. So, I mean, just to keep this in mind that, this particular policy was not something that just came up overnight. It spread throughout Europe as the Nazis conquered certain parts of Europe. So it was a policy that expanded and unfolded over time. And again, coming back to this particular event, the Kristallnacht attacks. We've already talked about them in previous lessons, but let's go back and review them again, because this is also another example, of anti-Semitic behavior that is going to be part of the Holocaust and is establishing the foundations of the Holocaust. The Kristallnacht attacks are going to happen over November 9th through 10th in 1938. And this is after learning that his family had been deported from Germany. A Polish Jewish individual who was a teenager actually shot a German diplomat in Paris. So this is the event that actually started this. So there was a Polish person, a Polish family that was living in Germany. And his family had been deported from Germany and sent back to Poland. Well, this individual was very upset by that. And so he shot a German diplomat in Paris. And so as a result, Germany's response was to then attack its Jewish citizens. That was Germany's response. So in retaliation, Nazis launched a coordinated attack on Jewish stores, synagogues, and homes all across Germany. So when it says all across the Third Reich, it means all across Germany. They literally attacked as many German businesses, homes, synagogues as they could. So this event is known as Kristallnacht. And so in Kristallnacht, it's the night of the broken glass is what this means. 30,000 Jewish men and boys were arrested and sent to concentration camps over a 2-day period. Hundreds of synagogues were destroyed and more than 7,000 businesses were damaged or completely destroyed. Nazi Germany fined the Jewish community 1 billion Reichmarks, or which would be $72 billion today, to pay for the damage that they themselves created. So just let that sink in. So this is The Kristallnacht attacks, perfect example of anti-Semitic behavior by the Nazi regime in Germany. Now, you do need to know that in terms of Nazi camps, there are, we always say concentration camp. Concentrate. Everybody understands it and has heard that term. But that is only a certain type of camp that was used by the Nazi regime. The Nazis had used a myriad camps. And so one of them is concentration camps, and this is for the detention of civilians seen as real or perceived enemies of the Reich or enemies of Germany. So that is what a concentration camp was. But they had several different types. For example, forced labor camps. This is where they brutally exploited the labor of prisoners. There's transit camps. These were function as temporary holding facilities for Jews awaiting deportation. You had POW camps, or prisoner of war camps. So this is where, Allied prisoners of war were kept. Then you had the extermination camps. These are the ones that actually had, the gas chambers and those type of things that were used as euthanasia, quote unquote, was what they had described it as, but they were actually extermination camps. So oftentimes people, when they say, concentration camp, oftentimes they're kind of putting them in as extermination camps, but in essence, they're actually, in some regards, are two different entities. But just take a moment here to look through these types of camps and make sure you're familiar with the different types of camps that the Nazi regime used throughout its tenure. Take a moment here to look at the death tolls by population and identity. 6 million plus Jews, up to 250,000 Roman Sinti, around 2,000 Jehovah's Witnesses, hundreds of thousands of LGBTQ plus, individuals with disabilities, 250,000, and the list goes on and on and on. Pause to reflect if you need. Here are statistics: death by location, Auschwitz complex, untold, perhaps 1 million or over. Treblinka, close to 1 million. Belzec, exact number 434,508. Sobibor, Chemlo. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But just take a look at these numbers and the magnitude, and think of the lives that were lost as a result of this. And of course, this is a deep trigger warning for those of you that may be deeply disturbed by this, because we are discussing the Holocaust. These next slides are optional for you to view. So if you do wish to scroll forward on YouTube, please feel free to do so. Just, scroll the thing through until you see the stop sign at the end. But these slides are optional, but there are pictures from concentration camps, and many of you will more than likely find these disturbing. And again, this is optional for you to do, so if you feel uncomfortable, you can scroll fast through this part. So these are all images for you to look at so that we will never forget this, because this is something we're starting to see around the globe about people questioning, again, was the Holocaust real? And so this is part of this misinformation that's being spread around this world, and we're here to, stop a lot of that misinformation. But look at this image. In the Holocaust, we lost untold countless number of children. We lost a countless number of gentlemen, families, brothers, husbands, fathers. In the extermination camps, ovens were actually used to get rid of the bodies, to hide the evidence of the atrocious crimes that the Nazis were committing in these extermination camps. So in these ovens here, again, how many millions of people ended up here? And then how many lives and families were ended as a result of this behavior? This is a typical scene that Allied soldiers would have seen when they arrived in concentration and extermination camps all throughout Nazi-occupied territories through Europe. and especially into Nazi Germany. But these soldiers, I mean, just dead bodies strewn. I mean, these are the things that these soldiers would see, and you got to think about this, psychologically, how these soldiers are going to react and respond to this. Many of these men probably were psychologically scarred for the rest of their lives. Again, this is another image of what Allied soldiers. These are a group of Allied soldiers, I believe, that are coming down to observe and trying to continue cleaning up and figure out and organize. These are all bodies that they're trying to see if they can, organize and if maybe somebody can identify them so that they can at least try to find next of kin. These are the kind of things that not Nazi, but Allied soldiers had to deal with and contend with. And so we cannot forget this. That's why we say we never can forget this, because this did happen. Regardless of what other people may say or feel, this did happen. And we need to recognize that, and we need to honor that, and do everything we can in our power to prevent these type of things from happening ever again. This particular picture here is world famous, if I'm not mistaken. I believe this was a Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph. I'm not mistaken, but 100% sure. But this ended up actually being a photograph that shows Elie Wiesel, who is the gentleman who wrote a Nobel Prize-winning book called Night, that talks all about his experiences as a Holocaust concentration camp survivor. And so this was actually, he was photographed in this world famous photograph, and he himself is a Nobel Prize winning author. And here we see, smiling, jubilant faces of Jews, Roma, Sinti, LGBTQ, or other whoever undesirable these were, that as Germans would, or Nazis would have labeled them. What you're seeing here is jubilation and elation, smiling and screaming from these individuals, because this camp has just been liberated by the Allies. And so that is why you're seeing such a happy, face from these individuals, because at least for this group, the war is over, and they can begin the healing process. So there you have it, lesson 2.8, the Holocaust is now completed. So, can you describe certain aspects of the Holocaust, including race laws in Germany? Can you explain the Jewish badge system that was developed by the Nazis? Can you describe the different types of concentration camps that existed? And can you illustrate the death toll facts from the Holocaust? If you can, pat yourself on the back. You did an amazing job. At this time, please look to see if there's any activities to complete for lesson 2.8. If there are, please go ahead and do so. If not, this actually concludes our case study of Adolf Hitler. Please go ahead and see your instructor for any further details or instructions. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day.